I knew the way, I would take you home.
Hey everybody, day 30, quarantine history. I can't really do this with you here. I don't know how I would do this, it's not very clear. But normally in class, and I'll just do it real quick, normally in class today I'd have you get out a piece of paper, I'd have you put 6 squares on it, and we would go through this picture. And what I would do is I would have you write down what you see in these pictures. And so they're all in pieces. You know, you see the clouds, there's the ocean there, the Indians, the wagon trains, there's a city in the background and a train, and the sun is rising. This one has a farm and the telegraph wire and a train, and then there's this lady in the middle, that's Columbia. And then I reveal the whole picture, which is really kind of one of the fun days we have doing it. But this picture is trying to convey the idea of what's called manifest destiny. This idea that, I should just tell you, you should probably write this down. This idea that God has given white men, white Europeans, this land here in America on purpose, and it is in God's intention that white people take their religion and their knowledge and their technology and their cities and their farms and their agriculture, and they spread this thing from one side of the continent all the ways to the other. And I'm not sure how well you can see this, but that's why, you know, the sun is rising on the one side of the picture, which would be the East Coast, and on the West Coast is still very, very dark because none of this stuff has reached it that far yet, and the savages are still there. And it's just this idea that America should spread from sea to shining sea. When you get to the 1840s and America's getting bigger and bigger and it's pushing further and further, this thing really starts to gain legs. You know, it's divine. This is supposed to happen. There's nothing in your way except for these savage people, and it becomes this idea of manifest destiny. People hoped that it would prevent overcrowding in eastern cities. They're ignoring the fact that the Indians are already living in a lot of these places. Mexico owns a lot of these places that you feel God. They're not white people. You know, Mexico owns California. Mexico owns, you know, a lot of the western part of the country. That doesn't even cross their minds. This is theirs, and God wants them to have it. One of the biggest justifications that people will use is for doing this is that you know, the Indians, they're wasting the land, and the reason they know they're wasting the land is they're not putting farms there, right? They're just, this needs to be in the hands of people who know what to do with it, and democracy needs to be spread from one ocean to the other. And so it's this idea that comes in the 1840s that really spurs a lot of this movement across the country. John Tyler is going to become president in 1841. He'll replace William Henry Harrison, who dies after 30 years in office, and I've told you that a bunch of times. Western expansion. This is going to become a huge political issue over in the election of 1844. There are a lot of people who want it to happen, and a lot of people who don't. Tyler's a pro-slavery Whig who wanted to extend power to the slave states by making the country grow, and the easy solution for him to do that was to annex Texas, which is coming right around the corner here. But his idea of annexing Texas and expanding slave power becomes a real hot issue in the election of 1844. This is on the test, I know for a fact. This expansion, this idea expansion, even though Tyler was a Whig, was really unpopular in the Whig Party. In 1844, the Whigs are going to nominate Henry Clay, who I told you earlier wanted more than anything else in the whole world to be president. Not going to happen. At first, because he was a Whig, at first he was opposed to annexing Texas, and then once he finds out that he's going to lose a lot of votes because of that, he's going to change his mind and say that it's a good idea, and we go back to he just wanted to be president more than anything in the whole world. That's probably going to cost him. His opponent is going to be James Polk, who is a Democrat. Polk's going to campaign for the annexation of Texas and Oregon both. There's going to be a third-party candidate, but in the end, ultimately, Polk's going to win. We know Henry Clay is never president by a very thin margin. And so Polk will start with Oregon. Oregon is shared between the United States and the British. I've already posed that question to you. More and more Americans are moving there every day, and those Americans who are moving there start to insist on being annexed and added to the United States. Obviously, being part of the United States, and we've talked before, the United States military now protects you. The United States currency you now use is now stable. There's just so many benefits in being part of the United States of America. Others argued that Oregon could be a Pacific port, would help the United States grow with China, but the United States and Britain are going to get into a very severe argument over where to split it. And what they're going to do is they're going to split it. Early on, the war slogan was 54-40 or fight. 54-40. Now, the parallel of the United States today, the northern border is 49, and so if you can imagine, if the United States has gotten its way, you know, the United States, the northern border would want to cross the way it does now, and then it would have shot up in the air and then went back across. It would kind of look like the United States had a spoiler on the back end of it. But the United States is going to threaten war. In 1846, Britain and the United States are going to sign a peace treaty, and the picture here you can see where 49 would have been. We would have had Vancouver and everything if 54-40 would have been the case. But in the end, the United States and Great Britain are going to avoid war, and they're just going to extend the 49th parallel all the way to the Pacific Ocean. And that's going to set the border between present-day United States and then British Canada, now just Canada. And in 1848, Oregon's going to become a territory. 1845 in March, under Polk, Texas is going to be annexed and become part of the United States. People in Texas have wanted this since the beginning. Americans are continuing to move there, and Texas hoped that the United States, being part of it, would solve all their economic problems, and it does solve most of them. And so the Texas is going to approve that in June and December 1848. Texas is going to become a state. Mexico obviously has made peace with them, but they still consider Texas stolen from them ultimately in the end, but there was nothing they could do about it. And so there's the new United States with the addition of Texas, and then you have the Oregon Territory now. And so you're really starting to set the borders and making the United States look what it looks like. The only thing that is really left are these two pieces here, which we'll get to here relatively shortly. Mexico is not happy about Texas joining the United States. In retaliation, they're going to cut off all diplomatic ties with America, and they're going to order the removal of all American settlers from California. Now, it's not a very attainable solution. We already talked about when we did the beginning of the unit. We talked about California. It's way out there. It's so far separated from everybody else. There's really not enough power in the Mexican government to get rid of these people. It's sort of like if you went back to the proclamation of 1763, could the British really remove all the people from the frontier? And the answer is no. And they won't be able to move the Americans from California either. They're going to ban immigration there, not that it matters. And there's going to be a dispute between the United States and Mexico on where the southern border of Texas is really at. The United States is going to claim that the southern border of Texas is the Rio Grande River, which is where it is today. And the government of Mexico is going to claim that that border is on the Nueces River, which is a little bit higher here. And so you have this strip of land here in the middle that both countries are going to claim belongs to them. In 1845, Polk is going to order 3,500 troops into that disputed spot. There was only 5,500 people in the entire army, so he puts almost 2/3 of the United States Army that exists, down between those two rivers. At the same time, he's going to claim that they're there to protect Texas from an invasion by Mexico. At the same time, he's going to send diplomats to Mexico City and try to negotiate a treaty and get Mexico to sell California for $30 million. And so he's very, very determined to add California and the rest of that land to the United States. He puts an army, most of the U.S. Army, on disputed land, and he's going to send people to offer to buy it. You could think of if you had a big piece of property and your neighbor built a barn in your backyard, and then at the same time he's knocking on your door asking you if you want to sell it. What are you doing? Right? He's provoking you to do something. Polk is doing the exact same thing. That'd have been about $800 billion in today's money. Obviously, Mexico is going to refuse to negotiate. They have no interest in selling any of it. And so in 1846, Zachary Taylor is going to march his troops to the outskirts of the town, Matamoros, on the Rio Grande River. He's going to go right to the edge of the Rio Grande River, which, by the way, the United States says that's ours, but he marches right up onto a Mexican army outpost and basically stands on the other side of the river from it. And so he's provoking a fight. He's asking for it. If someone invaded the United States and said, well, no, this belongs to us, and they put an army there, you can guarantee the United States is going to throw a punch, right? They'll probably ask you to leave, and as soon as you don't, they're going to hit you with a missile. And so this is the exact same thing that's happening here. This is all a setup, right? This is all a setup. You get Mexico to shoot first, and then you make the claim, well, they started it. And that's exactly what's going to happen here. In April, the Mexican general is going to warn Taylor to remove his troops. He's going to refuse to do it, and the Mexicans are going to cross the river into what Taylor considered the United States, which the Mexicans considered Mexico, and attack a group of 63 American soldiers. 11 are killed and 5 are wounded. The rest are all captured. It was a complete setup. You can tell the rest of the world now, once you take all this land, that Mexico started this fight. And so it's just like covering your rear end. Polk told Congress that the Mexicans invaded the United States, shed our blood, and that we were now at war. Now 2 days later, Congress is going to declare war for the second time in United States history. And so if you're going through your little map that I put up there earlier, how do we get Oregon? It's treaty. How do we get what's called the Mexican secession? We're going to get it through war. Newspapers news of the declaration of war is going to spread pretty quickly through the United States. The telegraph wires are starting to be hung everywhere. Initially, the Mexican army is going to outnumber the United States. They had better weapons and equipment. The United States had better weapons and equipment. The United States is going to call up 50,000 volunteers to go fight this war. More than 200,000 people are going to sign up. This always happens anytime there's a war in the United States, whether it's the Iraq War after 9/11 or World War I or whatever the case may be. There's always a wave of patriotism, and people think there's going to be this great adventure and they don't want to miss out on it. A lot of these people are grandsons of people who fought in the War of 1812, have all heard all these great stories about Jackson defeating the British, and they went in. It's a pretty regular occurrence. About 100,000 men will serve in the war, in the Mexican-American War. The Mexican-American War will be the first war fought mostly on foreign soil. I know these are on the test. It'll be the first time that newspapers will send reporters to cover the war. Because of the telegraph, that stuff will come back to the east very quickly. It'll be the first war that'll be photographed. Men and women on the home front will collect supplies, and supporters are going to argue that the war would help spread our Republican values and this manifest destiny idea. The people who are going to be opposed to the war are mostly the Whig Party, and they're going to claim the war is unjustified, the war is unnecessary. It upsets a lot of people who are worried about the slave power getting more land. It upsets Northern abolitionists because of the spread of slavery. But pro-slavery people are all for it. And like I said, it's all spin, right? I mean, hey, we were invaded by these people, we need to go knock the crap out of them. Your average person is going to sign up. Your average person is going to sign up and go and fight. We'll stop there just because it's starting getting a little bit long for today. There's a few questions on there. I'm trying to get to the end of the unit for you to help you out and try to get this done. Hey, we're running out of time. I'll see you tomorrow.
If I knew the way, I would take you home.